direction. The consumer perspective is very different in the fact that the consumer perspective is different in a good way, in the fact that we want the health system to understand what it is like to be a consumer in the health system and face the challenges that we do every day, which this policy does predict in a great way, talking about the person-centered approach. So how do you communicate? How do you, what do you like to eat? Things like that. How do you like your care done? For example, I'll share 2 stories with you today. One negative and one positive, but they all bring out a good message in the end. There was one boy who was blind, who was hearing impaired and had some sight impediment as well. The hospital didn't know how to communicate with him. So they said, how do we communicate with him? They designed a chart, right? That said yes, no, and maybe. And this person had to look up at the chart and say what they wanted. This process took quite a long time until I got to the room and said to them and looked at his communication, his care plan, and it said this person can communicate by smiling, by frowning, and by you can tell them to touch how they wanted to touch. So I said to the nurse, to the doctor, did you look at this care plan before you started the process? Oh, the carer before didn't hand over that care plan was available. So I explained to the care team how that worked in my role as a friend of that person and as an advocate. I've been an advocate since for about 5 years, so since about 2006 or longer. And yeah, so as I explained to them that this is how he should be what they should go off. This is kind of a mantra of his care. I guess a mantra is not the best way to look at it, because this person's thoughts, minds, and attitudes change every day. So why should their life be on a care plan? But it's the best option for them at the time. So this person had a full recovery, and the family were happy in the end. The question I have, the question that still remains in my mind, is every thought in that person's head really what they wanted it to be? So we give that, with that thought, I was kind of sitting there and I was thinking, I wonder whether this person was happy with their care. So I went and asked them. They gave me a write-up on their communication device. I gave that to the hospital and said, improve for next time. Another perspective is that this person was happy that they were able to improve the health service for the next person, and now that hospital has a better understanding of how to care for people with disabilities. For example, I myself am male-only care. That's my choice. I choose to have my own carers. That's my choice. I choose to have my own carers in the hospital and like their opinions to be respected. When I'm in hospital, maybe I'm well, maybe my medication's a bit high, I'm at the time, and I'm unable to communicate for myself. But I look fine, but sometimes you need a little help along the way. I've spent a lot of time advocating throughout the country regions as well, where it's treated quite differently. For example, I was in a hospital once, and someone was a Noongar person was speaking their native tongue. The nurses, they took the time to learn some of that language. It was quite an amazing thing to watch. That's what we want. We want an involved health service. We want a health service that understands, that wants to learn and create from those goals. So how do we do that? We create policies like this to allow education, understanding, and movement for the future. Without such policies, this wouldn't be possible. I sit back in hospitals, I look at how they run, and I get in there, I make them understand as much as I can and get the voices of other consumers out there who may not be able to communicate for themselves. There's plenty of people out there like me, but there needs to be more. So I sat back and I thought, how can we build on this message? How can we create? And it made me come to one conclusion. We need to encourage people to be more at one with the health service. We need to encourage doctors to not be afraid of what patients have to say and embrace them. One doctor at one stage said to me, and he now forgives me for what he said, but he hoisted me on a bed once and said to me, why are you questioning my technology? I said, I'm not questioning your technology. I'm just telling people how it works for other people. I'm just telling people how it works for me. And that was the technology that I have in my body every day of my life. So how am I questioning your technology? And from that, and from their decisions, from what they consulted with the doctors, they then said, I don't want the technology. That's their choice. Another person who uses the technology that I use, which is intrathecal baclofen pumps medication into my spine 24 hours a day to stop the jitters and everything that you sometimes see, has said to me, can I have someone come and talk to my mum and dad about the technology, because she was unable to communicate that for herself, her wishes, and she had a public advocate at the time. So I went and spoke to the mum. I said, this is a real good thing for her. This is what she wants. And bluntly, I said, look at how she is on that bed to what she will be now. And that mother, she cried for a little bit, and then she said, you know what? You're right. And the smile on this client's face was amazing. It brought tears to my eyes on that day to see her pain-free. And, you know, now she has that pump and it's changed her life forever. But without such technology, how are we able to, without such technology and doctors that know how to communicate with patients and everything, how are we able to allow for understanding? You know, and that's what I'm thinking. When I say that, it's, you know, we want to see patients have more control. We want to see that. But we also want to know that the right message is getting across. You know, I've spent over a month in a hospital as a patient full-time, as many people with cerebral palsy do, and other disabilities. And I was, you know, paraded, you know, I was come to by student doctors all the time, saying, how can we make this better? How can they learn from us? And, you know, they offered me free food and stuff, which I thought was great, because the hospital food was quite, you know, not that great. But, and when you say stubbable food, because you can't feed yourself any other food, they still send you food that isn't quite adequate. But that's all changing, you know. Now dietitians and doctors are getting more understanding, because you have to get the people to bring in the food and say, this is what I eat at home, and this is how I eat. Interestingly, I was at a conference the other week where they said, oh, what about a patient passport? And I said, what's a patient passport? And they said, oh, some little thing that has all this information about the patients. And I thought that was a great concept. And I'm hoping in the future to bring it wider out there to save a lot of trouble, a lot of issues that we're having at the minute. But it's all about education. How does that person like to be dressed? How does that person like to be showered? Who do they want to shower them? It's all about that as well. And the emerging technology and operations as well that allows for people with disabilities to live a less pain-free life. For example, when you go and talk to a doctor about prospective operations, and you say, what about this operation, what about that operation? And the other day I had to have a blood test. I said to the doctor, have you ever heard of that test? And the doctor said, yeah, well, it's not one that's commonly used. But the thing is, for the people with disabilities, it gets back the results faster. So you know the answers you've been looking for before they actually happen. Not before they actually happen, but quicker than what you would if we were to wait for any other test. So it's about being knowledgeable, but we want those doctors to be knowledgeable of what resources are out there to improve on disabilities. It's kind of like you are the educators of the doctors. The best people to educate the doctors are the families, the friends, the support networks, as we've been saying throughout this policy development. I'm not the only one out there today. There's plenty of other people, including friends that are unfortunately can't get their own message out there, but we are the ones there to do it for them. But I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had some technology installed in patient entertainment systems and things like that that would allow for any patient to communicate with the use of iPad technology. That these doctors could have different ways of communicating with them, and say, this could, potentially say to them, that it would help them get their message out there. There's technology they're using in America right now that has cameras in the rooms, and it allows to record what happens. Now, I don't condone that, but with that, you could have an entertainment system that could allow them to communicate, and it would be a lot simpler for them to do so. We need to embrace the carers, embrace the families, embrace the networks, and look at things like, does that person have a healthcare directive? Does that person have power of attorney? Or does this person really need guardianship? Or could they look after their own affairs? And I had a case where someone had guardianship and they didn't really need it. They've won the case now, and they're living their own life. Sure, they might make mistakes along the way, but we all do. It's about empowering independence, empowering their voice, and empowering them to be one in the community and educators along the way. I thank you for listening, and any questions, I have a YouTube channel as well, which today's talk will be uploaded to, so if you want to come back to it later, let me know. Thank you for listening.
So you're recording?
Recorded it?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh, stop it.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think you really highlighted not only how important it is for people with disability to be educators in their own rights, but the value of people like yourself who recognise